again, if you're just joining us, please introduce yourself in the chat, and you can also list your affiliations. And we're gonna get started. So thank you all for being with us today. We're very excited to have Dr. Angela Chalk with us today, who in a few minutes will be presenting Preserving Our Culture While Understanding Severe Weather Impacts. Dr. Chalk is the founder and executive director of Healthy Community Services in New Orleans over in the 7th Ward, and we're really, really honored to have her with us today. So this is our management team. Let me move this up so I can see everybody. Okay. So myself, my name is Jonathan Forey. I'm the executive director of the South Louisiana Wetlands Discovery Center. We also have with us Miss Maida Owens, who is the Folk Life Program Director over at Louisiana Division of the Arts. Dr. Rachel Doherty with the Center for Louisiana Studies over at the University of Louisiana Lafayette. We also have, who is also organizing or helping to organize maybe something with the Acadian Brown Cotton conference that may be happening.
Yeah, the Acadian Brown Cotton group associated with Fiber Shed are hosting their annual meeting, which is kind of like a conference and a demonstration at the Center for Louisiana Studies tomorrow. So we're setting up right now. But if y'all are in Lafayette and you're interested in Acadian Brown Cotton, come by the Center for Louisiana Studies. It'll be all.
That's awesome. They do such beautiful work too. We were discussing that for Christmas, all I want is one of the tea towels that they make, because they just do such a beautiful job there. And then, of course, we have Dr. Gary LaFleur, who is the R.E. Miller Endowed Professor of Honors Studies and Professor of Biology over at Nicholls State University. Excuse me. So here is a Louisiana map of the 9 major cultural subregions. And we use this map to also say that we do not have all of the answers. We don't support any particular adaptation or management strategy to solve the many challenges. We're just here to explore our options, talk about these issues, to get a better idea of good pathways forward. These are our partners, the Louisiana Folk Life Program through the Division of the Arts, the South Louisiana Wetlands Discovery Center, the Louisiana Folklore Society, the Center for Bayou Studies over at Nicholls State University, and the Center for Louisiana Studies over at University of Louisiana. We couldn't do any of this work without our funders, so a big thank you to the National Endowment for the Arts, the Barataria-Terrebonne National Estuary Program, Restore the Mississippi River Delta, the M.J. Sindler Family Fund for Culture and Media, Louisiana Office of Cultural Development through the Division of the Arts, and the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities. I'd now like to invite Ms. Maida Owens to talk a little bit about the Passing It On workshops.
Yes, thank you. I would love to get, if y'all share with me anybody that you think needs to has a tradition that really needs to be passed on. Next slide. We're going to be giving out more money starting in January. But I want to share a past tradition bearer who did a past workshop. Geraldine Robertson is the only active split wood basket maker. She uses oak, but it can be done with cypress. And she's been working with the West Baton Rouge Museum, who has wonderfully supported her in doing 5-day workshops from cutting down the tree to finishing your basket. And so I'm hoping she'll be willing to do that again this year, because this is one of the most endangered traditions.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Maida. And I'm fingers crossed that I'll be able to get to participate in those workshops, because it's an amazing opportunity. and Miss Geraldine is such a wonderful person. So today, here's our agenda. We're gonna listen to Dr. Angela Chalk's presentation. We'll have a brief question and answer session with her. Then we'll ask her what her hope for the coast is. We'll get a few updates about the working groups and when they meet. We open the conversation up to anybody in the group that would like to make any announcements. And then we hope that folks will stick around for the informal discussion. Usually that takes place about 1 o'clock to 1:30. So it is with great honor and pleasure that I'm able to introduce all of you to a dear friend of mine who it's been years since we've been knowing each other now. And I so enjoy watching all of the work that you do through your Facebook posts and the impact that you've had on your community. And so with no further ado, I would like to hand the conversation over to Dr. Angela Chalk, who is the founder and executive director of Healthy Community Services over in the 7th Ward. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me. And let me just say that I have another long-term co-principal partner on the Zoom with us, Dr. Amy Lesson. And so thank you all. It feels good to be with people that you know, love, trust, and respect. So thank you for having me, Jonathan. Yeah. And so let's get started. So let me get the sharing. Yes. And so when you called me to ask me about making a presentation for this event, the one thing that has been on my mind recently since joining Tulane University as a visiting adjunct professor is the culture and the mental health and wellness of our communities, whether it's in urban settings or rural settings. And so this is where I came up with the title of Preserving Our Culture While Understanding Severe Weather Impacts on all communities. And so what we know is that wherever you're at on the spectrum, I'm trying to change the slide, wherever you're at on the spectrum of whether you believe in climate change or severe weather impacts, the effects are the same. And so we're going to define some key words about how the government looks at and how federal agencies look at disasters and how they determine what our risks are in those areas that are impacted. And so we'll look at some low weather impact disasters, major weather events, and then resiliency. And I like to say that resilient is a term that is relevant. It's like who are we defining as being resilient? And then comparing rebuilding in urban and coastal communities, and then understand how those changes affect us. And so when we look at what's now being termed as low impact disasters. Low impact disasters are those conditions that don't garner that national attention. So they occur, but they still have the same detrimental impacts on a community as if it were a major event. So that could be anything from tidal flooding to hazardous spills, power outages, and flooding. But this has no less impact to our psyche, our economics locally than if it were a major impact disaster. And so major weather events are classified as a series of events that cause destructive or deadly effects, as it states here. And they're terming these weather events, and there are 18 weather events classified by the National Weather Service. And those include hurricanes, tornadoes, thunderstorms, hail. Those are the things that we know have billions of dollars in economic impact. But what we also know is that currently there are studies by the Washington Institute that can put a dollar value on the impacts of those low impact disasters. And so when we talk about that, we talk about, oh, it's a resilient community because they came back. Well, we're only resilient because we have family, friends, and for those of us who are faith-based people, and our cultural and social norms is what helps us to be resilient. It doesn't mean that we're recovering any quickly from a disaster, whether it's a low impact disaster or a major weather event. The effects on us physically are the same. And so when folks start coming up with these definitions, I need you all to understand what they're talking about, but the effects are the same. And so we look at what risks, hazards, and exposures and vulnerabilities are. And so the Global Assessment Report of 2015 defined the risk as the likelihood of losing life, injury, or destruction of your property, the likelihood. So how do we do that? How do we deal with that when you know that there's someone out there in an organization who has said, what is your likelihood of not recovering, the hazard that it presents, the exposure to that hazard, and all of those things are the things that make you vulnerable. So how do we deal with that? So in rebuilding our communities, we think about higher insurance costs. So it doesn't matter where you're at on the economic scale, higher insurance costs are affecting all of us, whether you're a homeowner, renter, or business. Because as you locate in these areas, and even now, you all know in Southeast Louisiana, some folks don't even want to insure us. And if you get insurance, it's so astronomically high that you might as well just put that money on the side waiting for your risk to come than to pay insurance premiums. Now I'm not recommending that, but you all get the point that the costs are so exorbitant that is it really worth it to pay into insurance only for you to have to later, when you need it the most and you're going through the most traumatic experiences of your life, that an insurance company will say, well, we're only going to pay you X, because how do we know if this was flood damage or wind damage? And we had those conversations during Katrina. And so the comparison also Jonathan and I were having this conversation the other day, is that folks in coastal communities, you all are the front line to preserving those of us who live in uplands and in urban communities. And so we also have to adjust to our social and cultural norms when people start to move, because they can't habitate in their homes in place because of a disaster. And those of you I know who, what it was, Hurricane Ida, and I happened to drive down there and I saw that destruction, and I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be a long time to come back. And what we know as public health practitioners as well is that people who are of low, moderate income or disinvested communities are the first to be impacted and the worst, but the last to recover, because we go through so many hoops just to get back in, only to have another disaster to happen on top of that. And so when we're dealing with all of that, as in rural areas and in urban settings, we're dealing with our wellness and health. So how do you begin to make these decisions about rebuilding when you're tired? You may be aggravated with your spouse or your children. You're aggravated with the insurance company saying, well, this doesn't do this, or we need X to help you to rebuild. And so that takes a toll on one's mental and physical wellness. So, how do communities begin to understand those changes post disasters? You have to do what and keep things just as normal as you possibly can. And some of those things may be understanding how nature based solutions work with the hydrology and hydraulics of moving water out. So, those of you who are outside of the levee system, you deal with hydrology, meaning that the water, or whatever the situation may be in the instance of flooding, the water goes to the lowest spot. So if you have high tide coming in, high tide is going to raise that flood risk level just because of high tide, and then all of a sudden it goes out. So in the meantime, you're still dealing with that. So you're needing to make and understand what adaptation measures you can take, and yet maintain that balance of your cultural and social norms. And then finally, when there's no power, then we all have to relocate. There's no way to live in a community when there's not power. There's something about when the lights come on, and I know you all have felt it because I felt it when the lights come back on, oh, suddenly there's life. And so that rings true. When you have no lights, you have no light, no life. And so those things are things that we can begin to advocate for changes in, such things as creating solar grids. And right now, we know that there's a lot of federal monies out there to create solar grids for a community using those other adaptation strategies that you can use, whether it's rebuilding, and I'm a firm believer of building back, so that you can be a little bit more resilient. But what we know is that, for instance, the summer of 2023 was the hottest summer on record due to heat. Ironically, it's also the coolest summer on record because scientists predict that it will be much hotter in the coming years because of climate change in those areas. And so it's important, if you have not started, I'll put a little plug in here, Amy. If you have not started planting trees and looking at ways to cool down your communities, because without going through the whole cycle, we know that the hotter it is, all of that moisture goes into the atmosphere and it holds there, and then suddenly it has a just downfall, downburst. So it's, and those events are happening more frequently and more intense. And so if you haven't thought about incorporating trees post disaster, now is a good time because it's the fall planting season, and not just any tree. You want to use native trees that are adapted to our climate in region. But in filling in the gaps of how we mitigate the impacts of communities, there is no one who can come into your community to tell you what your community needs or what your community should have. You are the only ones that can do that. And so don't let anyone come into your community to define your needs. They can assist you in facilitating in putting that together, because things have to be put together if you're looking for funding to be able to get the monies. But no one should be coming into your community to tell you what you need. Who knows better than you? You live there. You are the community experts there. And so the picture that you see on the screen is the Vision to Reality Stormwater Management Park that's located here in the 7th Ward of New Orleans. And this bioswale, and this was phase 1, this bioswale is managing 35,000 gallons of stormwater management. And it was the vision of the residents that said we wanted to see this project at this site, and we went through a whole process to advocate for that. And so now Healthy Community Services has a joint use agreement with the State Department of Transportation to maintain this site for the next 5 to 10 years. And so that was powerful in that a community-based organization was able to work with the Department of Transportation. And it not only serves the residents of the 7th Ward, but because it's located on hurricane evacuation route, it services the folks of Plaquemines and St. Bernard parishes as well. But I'm telling you this so that you can understand the impact that we as ordinary citizens can have in changing how our community looks, what our community needs are, getting funding for it, and recognizing that you have to bring everyone to the table and bringing government to the table and going with a plan, because honestly, they don't know. And when I say that, I mean that literally, because in the meetings that we have, they have expressed that they don't know. So if they don't know and you don't know, then you're really in the pickle about how you're going to move forward. So know what your needs are. Maintain your integrity of your cultural and social needs, no matter where you're residing, whether it's in rebuilding your home community or if you're somewhere else. Know what it is that you need and go with your plan to government. And then my call to action is get involved. It's just as simple as that. Get involved, advocate for those policy changes, create strategies that will work for your community, and then Document, it says document the events. Well, document the events and document your evidence. Keep good record keeping with that. And then most importantly is involve your youth in elders so that that intergenerational knowledge can be exchanged, because while our young folks are technologically savvy, our elders have a lot of wisdom, and combining the two of those makes for a better, stronger community in the passing on of that knowledge, so that those cultural and social norms are not lost. And so my funders, the people who pay the bills, is the USCPA, the National Academy of Sciences and Medicine, the National Fish and Wildlife Federation, Delta Audubon, the Greater New Orleans Foundation, National Wildlife Federation, and the Metropolitan African Methodist Church in Washington, D.C. as a part of the National Smart Surfaces Coalition. And so this is my contact information. I put it in the chat as well. And so if you need anything, and I've been listening to you all, it seems like I'm going to start spending a lot more time in the Bayou parishes. I'm over there in St. Mary's Parish. So as I'm passing through, I'm going to have to start making a stop, especially who mentioned about the hog head cheese? Because I eat hog head cheese. Okay, I'll have to stop over there to get some hog head cheese. Thank you all for listening.
No, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. And so, I mean, I'll first ask this question. How has Hurricane Katrina reshaped the Seventh Ward? And we had this discussion recently too, that your community never goes back to what it was before a disaster like this. It's recreated. What were some of the differences, good and bad, that happened after the storm?
Let's start with the bad. The
Yeah.
bad was that folks thought that government was going to be the end all and the savior for our communities. And that just didn't happen. I don't even think government realized that they did not have the capacity following these major events to be able to help with recovery. There were a lot of promises made. There were a lot of things that did not happen. And then if we're looking along racial lines, there were a lot of racial things that occurred in communities based on your zip code. So I don't know whether you realize it or not, but based on your zip code, um, you can determine what services and what amenities are going to go there, because we talk about the political determinants of health. And so when government is making these decisions, they're actually making these decisions, and oftentimes they're making these decisions based on populations that they think are worthy of it. We talk often about redlining and how communities are redlined and not invested in. And so your zip code is a very important factor. It's not just those numbers at the end of the mailing address. It's determined by whether or not this community is considered as worthy of being invested in to recover. The good part is that we live in an age where you have access to the internet, so you can just about find out anything now. Being on the internet, as you know, can be a two-edged sword, because you can get really bad information. However, you have access to really good information. That's public information. And even with that public information, you have to be able to read between the lines, because what I found is that government is trying to meet whatever mandates, and they're doing a checkbox. So they're not really engage with folks along the community engagement spectrum as they should be. And I'll look up the website that you can see what the community engagement spectrum model looks like. But if you're not familiar with it, do look that up so that you can understand when decisions are being made just how powerful the communities are. And here's the caveat: the federal dollars that are coming in now, it's mandated that you have to have community participation in that, and you are no longer just a checkbox. Oh, we went and talked with them.
Mhm.
No, it has to be active participation in that process from beginning to end. In communities locally here in New Orleans, we took that literally, and we're able to push the needle forward of how we want to see mitigation and adaptation in our communities.
Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Dr. LaFleur.
Talk. That was an awesome talk. Our side of the coast is slightly different from yours, but we have to deal with similar things. And I was wondering, you're so diplomatic. How do you, in a nice way, what do you say when somebody says, why don't you just move away? We have to answer that question pretty often, but
Yeah. Well, first of
uh,
all, Amy knows I cuss, and then I spend a lot of time with my preset confession. Okay. uh and when folks say move, and I've heard this a lot everywhere I travel and talk on these subjects, and folks say, why don't you just move away? Well, where would you like me to move? Because no matter where you go in this country, um there is a hazard that's just waiting around the corner. So that's my question. Where would you like for me to move? And then I always bring it back to documentation and showing the picture of the houses in the upper Mississippi River Valley, where the house is just flowing down the river, where it just fell off the cliff. Yeah, so, even in, Colorado, when the mountains just fell down, or the wildfires, and believe it or not, in San Francisco, they're having, reverse flooding issues, meaning that the water is coming from the ground table. They have too much water in the ground table. So that's always my question: "Where would you like me to go?" And it gets crickets.
Yeah, yeah.
Because even now in New York, they're having wildfires, and typically that's something that we see in the western region of our country.
Mhm. Amy, you have a question?
Yeah, I just put in the chat, Angela. I was like, you have not seen Angela angry. Like, do not cross this woman. You are entering a world of pain. Luckily, I have never been in that position. I was just wondering, when I met you, I think at the AGU conference in like 2016,
Mhm.
we were paired together for work, collaborative work, and we started this research project all conceived by you, and it's been amazing working with you and seeing your expertise evolve and flourish. And I just wonder, from your perspective, what's that journey been like? Like, I've never really asked you, just becoming such a talented and skilled researcher, which you were already when I met you, and having so much call for your expertise all over the world. I mean, how's that feeling to you? And like, what what have you noticed now that you have extra letters next to your name, as
Oh,
opposed to
Lord.
the way people used to treat you at meetings and things before you did? I mean, you've always had a
Yeah.
lot, but you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Let me say, that I say I don't do this by myself. I stand on the shoulders of a lot of people. You and Dr. Derek Van Berkel from the University of Michigan. Um, I stand on your shoulders. I stand on the shoulders of my elders who, from a young age, and I know Jonathan likes for me to mention this all the time, about my grandfather, because I didn't realize at the time the lessons he was teaching me would lead to where I'm at today. And then my academic success is due to having great professors, great mentors at Dillard University, at the University of New Orleans, and then not so much at Virginia University, but I do have professors there that I keep in contact with. And it's about building those trusting and loving relationships. You've seen all the hairstyles in this time period. But now having the letters behind my name and being a part of that club, because it is a club, um, and as a Black woman, I still get met with the resistance of, does she really know what she's talking about? And so if it was not for my family instilling in me young for me to know who I am and whose I am and relying on my faith, I would not be able to navigate those bad actors when I'm in the room with them. And I often tell folks, I was invited here. I didn't just show up. So somebody must have recognized the skills and the knowledge that I have. And I don't pretend. If I don't know it, I don't know it. I'll learn it, but I'm not going to pretend that I know something that I don't. And that's what makes me able to identify those folks who are just saying something, saying nothing, talking loud is what they say. So that I'm just the little girl from the 7th Ward. You know, I say that all the time. But Jonathan wants me to mention about my grandfather. And so some of the lessons that my grandfather gave was don't spend money you can't afford to lose. In the house that I live in, I'm the 4th of 5 generations to live in a house that my grandfather won in a card game in 1942. So many of you have heard that story. And so all of those life's lessons, and our children are watching us. They're watching us. They're not necessarily listening to what we're saying, but they're watching how we behave. And I saw how my grandfather conducted himself during segregation. And so that made me realize, how to conduct myself across a range of people and meeting people where they are and respecting people.
Thank you for sharing that, because I do love that story about the card game. That's one of my favorite things. Maida,
And I do play a mean game of cards too, for those of you who know. But our traditions during the holidays: bring your quarters. Don't come with those nickels, pennies, and dimes, because we're playing pitty pat. So I have to get my quarters together for the pitty pat game.
Quarters and cranberry sauce and the candy.
Yes.
Maida, you have a question?
Yeah, would you talk more about how how y'all decided, one, to make a garden, and two, where to put it? I'm wondering about the process of making something like that actually happen.
So Healthy Community Services is a part of the Waterwise Gulf South Collective. So it's a 6 community-based organizations that work with Waterwise Gulf South on stormwater management issues. So Healthy Community Services is focused on stormwater management, coastal resiliency, urban ag, and my research, as you heard, is in heat. And so we went through a community process with residents in the neighborhood on, first of all, doing community engagement and education around stormwater management, because those weren't conversations that we were having in Black communities. It just didn't exist. It started off with a prototype bioswale that's located here at my home, and the interest by residents piqued their interest in what was happening. I didn't even know that a bioswale would work, honestly. And then when it rained, I'm like, oh, it really does work. And it's made to infiltrate water into the ground, so that's the amount of water that's not getting into the storm drain. So residents sign up for a 101 educational workshop. They take a tour of different green infrastructure interventions, a tour of the pumping station, and the most important thing is the visioning session for that community. So they identified these hot spots, and that was identified as a hot spot. Once it was identified, and there were a series of them. Once it was identified as a hot spot, then residents decided which one was the priority. And they collectively decided that that particular intersection was the priority. And that's how that Vision to Reality site came into existence with funding from the Institute of Sustainable Communities. Dana Brown and Associates was the landscape architecture on that. And then we partnered with Groundworks New Orleans, a workforce development training organization, for their young folks to have real life experiences with installing an intervention of that size. So this was a collective effort all the way through. State Senator Royce Duplessis, when DOTD was stonewalling us, I called up State Senator Royce Duplessis, and at the time, the Chief Resilience Officer, Charles Sutcliffe, and said, "Hey, they are stonewalling me." And the next email I got was that it was approved. So, being able to engage residents, engage those elected officials, and educate them about what was going on, all boom, magic. There was approval from that. And from that, we were able to build a better relationship with the Department of Transportation and Development. Because if you've ever had to work with them, before, they're engineers, and so they're technical, and I needed for them to put themselves in not being the engineers, but put themselves in being in the community, because we are, first of all, living in communities, and we have jobs that we can make the difference. And then thirdly, it's because it's a hurricane evacuation route that not only served the residents immediately in the 7th Ward, but the fact that it served residents of Plaquemines and St. Bernard parishes.
So I have a couple more questions about the garden itself. I can't
Mhm.
remember from the image whether or not this was a vegetable garden, that produces food for the community, or I think it was not.
No, it's not. It's strictly a stormwater management site. Y'all gonna have to take a tour because it has, and I'm inviting you all. It has now expanded to we're in phase 2 now. It's now expanded to a solar powered resiliency hub that has mature trees that instantly brought the sound barrier down, that instantly brought the heat indices down. Researchers from Amsterdam monitors, it's a site to monitor water table levels. It has evolved into much more than what you see there. We're still reaping the benefits of it managing water, because when one side of the highway or one side of North Claiborne is flooded and the other side is not, the side that's the evacuation side is not. So I'm going to invite you all to come and see it in real life, because that was the picture of it at, I think it was maybe a year old, maybe 6 months to a year old, and that was the first time that it filled up. So the picture that you saw there is not what it looks like today. I think I have a more recent picture on Facebook, Jonathan saw it, because we're almost ready for phase 2 to see it. And this can be replicated. That's the thing. The size of that can be replicated. Elizabeth, when we put those trees in and those vegetation in the original site, the trees were about 5 gallons in the original part of it. The dwarf palmettos were 1 gallon in size, and maybe they're about 4.5 to 5 feet tall. It's also set to have something blooming at different times of the year. So right now, the muley grass is blooming. In the fall, the agapanthus and the irises. In the spring, the agapanthus and the irises will be blooming. So it's really an impactful site. It measures the whole length of that block, but the bioswale itself measures 160 feet by 140 feet.
And do y'all maintain it, or does DOTD?
No, that's a part of having that joint use agreement. We maintain that. And so you pay a lease annually to them. And let me say that when it was first put in, the assessment, it was assessed at $28,000. After phase one, it went up to $250,000. And I don't know what the assessment is going to be after phase two, but I can tell you that there has been over another $200,000 in investment. So we're looking at a property that may be now valued at half a million to $750,000 from $28,000.
Impressive. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Honora?
On that same vein, I was curious, you had mentioned about your work with heat islands and trees and urban gardens, and I was wondering if you could elaborate a little more on the work around those items, green space and, trees and urban gardens and the benefits. And I think for some of the folks here, it's, the mental and physical health benefits as well as the cultural and just the landscape benefits to moderate temperature and provide food.
Let me just say now, I said I was fourth generation resident here. Yeah, everybody in the seventh ward is a tree expert now. In that, when this just before fall planting season, they don't get the timing right, but they'll say, "Hey, it's time for those trees, right?" And I'm like, yes, it is time for the trees. And again, we have to do a lot of community engagement and outreach to first provide educational awareness about the trees. And then residents, again, decide um, we give them selections of trees based on what we can get in. And so they can decide where they want these trees to be placed. And so before we even plant trees, we're looking at, or I'm looking at, where folks park their cars, where they put their trash can. Um, and if you don't want one, it's okay. I'd rather you say you don't want one than for you to destroy the tree. And so we hire someone locally, and when I say locally, it's from the community to be the person to water the trees. And so it's turned into his part-time job that pays him full-time wages, not from us, but because of the other folks who have seen the him watering other community-based organizations, and they've hired him. And so, yeah, Entity did give away trees, but when you're planting in the public right of way, you have to go by the specs of the Department of Parks and Parkways. And so we have to follow those guidelines. And then we're responsible for them for the first year until they're established. So everything from mulch to tree bags, and I've learned more about the best practices of using the felt covers to protect the weeds from coming in, the ants from coming in. It's a lot to learn in that process, and then sourcing them, sourcing good quality trees, because if it's a tree that I'm ordering that's a native tree and it's not of good caliber or source, I'm not, you can't take it off the truck. I'm not I'm not accepting it. It is so bad with me that I can feel the soil and know if it's good soil, if it's a 80-20 mix of sand and soil, or if it's a 90-10 just by the weight of it. And these are the things when Amy talk about my skills have developed. My skills have developed in that source that I'm just not accepting anything into the community. I live and work here, so why would I bring in something that's substandard? Um, and then as it relates to our agricultural part, we're just getting back up again with our agricultural part because someone broke into our greenhouse and just did all kind of awful things. They took the solar because it was solar powered. They took the solar powered battery and backup power from that. So we're just getting it back online after a year. And that case went to trial. So we just a couple of weeks ago went to trial with that young man who all the social ills that we know, drug addiction, homelessness, the whole thing. So we should have plants going in for the fall, so that folks can come out and engage and learn about what foods, what are healthy food choices to be able to try new foods. Because in Black communities, folks ain't eating a whole lot of kale, but if I can make that connection to kale and mustard greens, um, then they may try it. As people, Black people not eating a whole lot of Swiss chard either, but they like the way it look. It's pretty, but what does that taste like? And so we have to have those. It's my job to make folks step out of their comfort zone to taste these different vegetables, to have access to them. And that goes along with me either. Swiss chard looks cute, but I don't know what that tastes like.
I'll share with you, Angela, that the
Mhm.
Cajun people down in Bayou feel the same way as the Black community because
Yeah.
kale and Swiss chard, we feel the same way.
Yeah.
But we do, mustard green. So,
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
see what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it helps with kids too. If you get the kids involved in gardening, I know some of the schools
yeah,
that have had gardens, and if the kids are
mhm,
involved, they'll actually eat vegetables that they grow. Their
mhm,
taste buds are
yes,
still
yes.
developing, so they're not quite as prejudiced against
Yeah.
certain foods. Or, a little more.
The other thing is that we did a anthropology of food, of where foods come from and why we eat them in the communities that we eat that. So folks like that. So we may bring back the anthropology of foods as well as interpretive gardening. Why do we plant in this way? Because whether or not we realize it or not, and I did this presentation when our enslaved ancestors planted foods, they planted them to direct the enslaved people along slave routes. And so they use geometric figures to tell you which way to go. They use certain herbs to tell you how to look for a safe house once you got to where you were going. And I did that presentation for a group, and they didn't invite me back for 3 years because they were like, "Oh, this was the secret to enslaved people escaping." But it was just the history of how we place plants for gardening in our history. And so having an interpretive garden is one thing that I want to see us develop here so we can understand our history.
I think that's wonderful.
Mhm.
I ask if everybody could please stick around until the informal part of the session, because then we can continue this conversation. But in light of time, Dr. Chalk, I would like to ask you, what is your hope for the coast? This is a question that we ask all of our presenters, and we'd like to hear from you.
What was my answer the other day? So I think my hope is for the people of the coast to be well rested and to get a grasp on their mental health,
Mm,
because we cannot leave a legacy of not having survived and being extinct. And so, in order for us to be able to leave our legacies in place, we have to pass that knowledge on to our young people. We have to accept the technology that we have now and incorporate the two. So, my hope for the coast is for the people to be well mentally and physically so that we can adapt to whatever it is that we have to adapt to. And no matter where we are, I know that there are some communities, because the sea level rise, are not going to be able to be in those communities. But no matter where you are, home is where you are, and you can bring those cultural and social norms to a new area. Yeah, I know we talked about you all on the bayou, how you navigate the waterways, the way I navigate the streets of the urban areas. I just want to point out that that is something that should never be lost, because you all are the buffer before things get to New Orleans or Baton Rouge. And so I just say thank you for staying where you stay at because of family, faith, and culture, and food. But we have to learn how to adapt, because the climate, weather, whatever you want to call it, is changing and it's changing rapidly. And so we have to be able to be open-minded to be able to recognize that.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And again, please, everybody, stick around and we're going to continue the conversation in just a few minutes. Something that we like to share with the group is that we do have a position statement, and that can be found at louisianafolklore.org, and we encourage everyone to sign on to that statement. We also have our working group meetings that we encourage folks to attend. If there is any of these meetings that you would like more information on, please just let us know. We have the Culture and Coastal Planning Group, the Artists and Tradition Bearer Group, Preparing Receiving Communities, Louisiana French Language Group, and then also Protecting Collections. We want to invite everyone to next month's Bayou Culture Gathering. We will have our very own Dixmore Broussard with us. She's an art therapist and director of the Neutral Ground Collective. She did some wonderful work with us at Rougarou Fest last month. So we hope that you'll join us on Friday, December 13th at 12 noon. Friday the 13th. It's going to be a great, it'll be a great time to be together. And we also want to share with you in the upcoming weeks, we're gonna send an email out to everyone that's in our contact list, and we want to hear from you about what you would like to see in our gatherings for 2025. So please begin thinking about guests that we should have in our gatherings, and we'd like to hear from you. So you'll be getting that in the next couple weeks. Any announcements real quick? One that I would like to ask Rachel, if you don't mind, any other information about the Acadiana Brown Cotton meeting that's happening over there? Do you know the times?
Yeah. So it's beginning at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
And it goes until 4. And there will be lunch around noon. I'm actually pulling up the event. So this is something that Acadian Brown Cotton is, and they are organizing, and they're associated with Fiber Shed. So this is a national organization that supports fiber arts and sustainable agriculture behind it. So Acadian Brown Cotton, they are an educational and artistic organization. They help people learn how to grow brown cotton, which, if you're not aware, brown cotton is an indigenous variety of cotton, and it is brown. It's beige. So which differentiates it from white cotton. It's named Acadian brown cotton because it was commonly and most visibly used by descendants of Acadians. But there will be a number of speakers from several universities who are going to be talking about all aspects of brown cotton, from sustainable agriculture to processing, and even to expanding our notion of the various cultures in Louisiana that used it. So whether the name's probably not going to change, but yeah, this is not a crop and a fiber art that is limited to people whose ancestors were Acadians. It belongs to everybody. So yeah, it's at the Center for Louisiana Studies at the Roy House. There will be demonstrations outside, talks inside. There's going to be gumbo.
I really want to go.
Come on, Jonathan.
Okay, so the address, it's at UL, but like what building?
So we're at 1204 Johnston Street. So the Center for Louisiana Studies we're on the campus of UL, but it's kind of off campus. So we're at the corner of Johnston and University. We're right across from like the main administrative building, which is also on the corner of Johnston and University. We're a big Victorian house, and yes, so the talks will be fascinating. I can't wait to hear about the different cultures that use brown cotton. And then also a really interesting talk, and it's the last one, so it's going to be closing out the day, where it's about feminine hygiene products and organic cotton and the dangers of buying like greenwashing in terms of when companies try to purport that a product is organic and somehow safer. So we have some scholars who are going to educate people on how to properly shop for your feminine hygiene products, and how to better read labels. And then, yeah, so it's about sustainability and taking like production and into your own hands if you want to, because they want people to grow this cotton, y'all. They
Yeah.
want people to not only become fiber artists or to work with this, but also to grow their own fiber plants. So they're going to
I
try
am
to
a happy grower of Acadian brown cotton. So it's my first year trying to participate in it, and it's been really cool, and it's fun to connect back to those traditions that I didn't even know our people had, you know. Last question on this, and I know we have to, and folks with your hands up, I'm coming. The registration, is there any kind of, do we have to register before you show up, or you just show up at the door and you say like, hey, I'm here, I want to listen to these talks? Do you know, Rachel? So that'll be the
Sorry,
first
was
question.
your question
Okay.
for me?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't know if you knew
No,
or
there's
not.
no registration.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to throw shade, but they had somebody doing pro bono promotion work for them, and
Sure, sure.
I asked them many times to do things a certain way so that I could actually have control over sharing it, and they never have.
I
So,
got you.
but I sent out a newsletter, and I'm right now actually trying to put out a few more social media posts because
Excellent.
not on my website because
Sure.
it didn't go according to how I wanted, but
Sure.
okay. A lot of
Can you
people
share it
involved.
with me? Can you share it with me and I can push it out as well?
Yeah, thank you. I'm finding their Facebook event right now.
Okay.
Um,
Thank
I'll put
thank
it
you
in
so
the
much
chat,
for that.
but no, there's no registration. Like you can just come. It's
Okay.
from 10 to 4. So
Awesome.
yeah, I'm having to like kind of go in and out with different
Excellent.
of,
Yeah.
but I mean, yeah. So it's not on the Center for Louisiana Studies website, but it is on our social media pages.
That's excellent. At least as long as we know a place to find the information.
Yeah,
So
the
again, we
Facebook
hope
event on
that.
there. And then, yeah,
All right.
Acadian Brown Cotton. I'm finding their website too.
Thank you. Thank you guys for that. So we hope that you will stick around for a little bit more. For the folks of you, this will sort of conclude the formal part of our discussion.